There are moments in life when the ordinary ceases to satisfy, when the weight of the familiar becomes unbearable, and a subtle, inexplicable restlessness stirs deep within your soul. It's as though the universe itself begins to whisper, urging you to step out of the shadows of your comfort zone and into the unknown. But how do you know when these whispers are not just fleeting thoughts or wishful fantasies? How do you discern the divine signals calling you toward a new path? These moments don't arrive with fanfare or blinding revelations. They are often quiet yet undeniable, gently tugging at the strings of your heart, disrupting your sleep, and awakening questions you can no longer ignore. They feel like a collision of discomfort and desire, a tension between who you are now and who you are meant to become. Perhaps you feel it even now, that gnawing sense that life as you know it no longer fits. Maybe it's a growing frustration with a career that offers no fulfillment, or a longing to leave behind the noise and pursue something that truly matters. Maybe it's an unshakable feeling that you're meant for more, and yet the path ahead remains shrouded in uncertainty. But here's the truth: life-changing decisions rarely arrive with perfect clarity. More often they come with just enough light for the next step, requiring faith to see the journey through. The divine never shouts, it whispers. It plants seeds in the soil of your discontent, waters them with your dreams, and waits for you to take notice. These signals come in many forms. They appear not to frighten, but to awaken. They disrupt the ordinary to remind you that your purpose is far greater than your present circumstances. They don't always feel comfortable, in fact. They often feel unsettling. But that is their purpose, to stir you from complacency and propel you into action. As you listen to the signs, ask yourself, is this the time for courage? Is this the moment you've been preparing for, even when you didn't realize it? Or will you look back one day and regret that you ignored the call? Now, let's uncover these divine signals together, 7 unmistakable signs that it's time to make a bold move. But as we do, stay open, stay curious, and most importantly, stay brave. Because the path you're about to walk may very well lead you to the life you were destined for. 1. A deep, unshakable restlessness. In the Bible, we see countless examples of divine restlessness. Consider the story of Abram, who would later become Abraham, the father of many nations. In Genesis 12:1, God calls Abram to leave his homeland, his family, and everything he knows. Go from your country, from your father's household, to the land I will show you. Imagine the restlessness that must have preceded that moment, the sense that he was destined for something more, something greater than his current circumstances. Abram's calling was not accompanied by a clear map or detailed instructions. It was a leap of faith, initiated by an inner stirring that whispered, "You were made for more." Restlessness often comes in seasons. It might start as a faint unease, a subtle discontent with the status quo. Over time, it grows louder, refusing to be ignored. In the story of Moses, this restlessness was not just an emotional experience, but a divine preparation. Raised in Pharaoh's palace, Moses could have lived a life of luxury and power. Yet there was a restlessness within him, a growing discomfort with the oppression of his people, the Israelites. This restlessness eventually drove him to action, as described in Exodus 2:11-12. When he intervened to defend a Hebrew slave. That moment marked the beginning of Moses' journey, a journey that would lead to his ultimate calling as the deliverer of God's people. When we experience this divine restlessness, it often feels like a contradiction. On one hand, it is deeply uncomfortable. It disrupts our peace and forces us to confront the gap between where we are and where we are meant to be. On the other hand, it is filled with hope, as it points to the possibility of something greater. The prophet Jonah is a vivid example of this tension. When God called Jonah to preach to the people of Nineveh, Jonah's restlessness manifested as resistance. He ran in the opposite direction, only to find himself swallowed by a great fish, Jonah 1:17. Inside the belly of the fish, Jonah's restlessness reached its peak. It was there, in the depths of his discomfort, that he surrendered to God's plan and embraced his calling. Jonah's story teaches us that restlessness is not to be feared but to be heeded, for it often leads us to the very place we are meant to go. In practical terms, divine restlessness often shows up in our lives as a series of small disruptions. Perhaps you feel a growing dissatisfaction with your job, not because it is inherently bad, but because it no longer aligns with your purpose. Maybe relationships that once brought joy now feel draining, as though they are holding you back from the person you are meant to become. These are not coincidences, they are signals. They are the cracks in the surface that allow divine light to shine through, revealing a path you might not have considered before. Restlessness also challenges our priorities. In Haggai 1:4-6, the prophet rebukes the Israelites for focusing on their own comfort while neglecting the rebuilding of God's temple. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? He asks. Their restlessness was a divine wake-up call, a reminder to realign their actions with their purpose. In the same way, our own restlessness often points to areas where we have become too comfortable, too focused on the temporary, at the expense of the eternal. This unshakable restlessness is not meant to torment us but to awaken us. It is a holy stirring, a divine interruption designed to prepare us for the bold moves we are called to make, whether it comes through subtle whispers or dramatic disruptions. Restlessness is a signal, a sacred invitation to step out in faith and embrace the unknown. The question is, will you listen? 2. A sudden shift in opportunities. In Scripture, one of the clearest examples of this sudden shift in opportunities is found in the story of Joseph. Joseph's life was a series of disruptions, from being sold into slavery by his brothers to being falsely accused and imprisoned. Yet, within those moments of hardship, opportunities emerged that ultimately led him to greatness. In Genesis 41:14, we see the pivotal moment when Joseph's life shifts. Pharaoh summons him to interpret a dream. Imagine the suddenness of this opportunity. Joseph, a prisoner, is called to stand before the ruler of Egypt. This wasn't luck, it was the unfolding of a divine plan. Had Joseph dismissed this opportunity or hesitated, he would have missed his destiny. These shifts often come disguised as challenges. At first they may seem inconvenient or even disruptive to the life you've built. Think of David, a shepherd boy who was suddenly anointed as the future king of Israel in 1 Samuel 16. This moment was a complete departure from the life he knew, tending sheep in the fields. Yet, it was a divine opportunity, a call to step into something far greater. David didn't ask for this shift, but he embraced it, trusting that the same God who called him would equip him. Divine opportunities often arrive with an element of the unexpected. They don't always align with our plans or timelines. In the book of Acts, we see an extraordinary example of this with Saul, later known as Paul. As Saul was traveling to Damascus, fully intent on persecuting Christians, a sudden encounter with Jesus changed everything. Acts 9:3-6. This was a moment of divine interruption, a sudden shift that redirected Saul's entire life. What seemed like a disruption was, in fact, an invitation to step into his true purpose. This is the nature of divine opportunities. They come when we least expect them and often challenge us to let go of our preconceived notions. These shifts also reveal something profound about timing. Ecclesiastes 3:1 reminds us, "To everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven." When opportunities arise, they are not random, they are perfectly timed. Yet recognizing them requires spiritual sensitivity. Opportunities can be missed if we are too focused on the past or too fearful of the future. Consider Ruth, a Moabite widow who found herself gleaning in the fields of Boaz. What appeared to be a routine task became the turning point of her life. Her faithfulness in the small opportunity placed her in the lineage of Christ. Ruth 2. Divine shifts often require us to show up faithfully, even when we don't yet see the full picture. These shifts don't always feel like blessings at first. They can feel like disruptions that force us out of our comfort zones. Look at Peter, a fisherman called by Jesus to become a fisher of men. Matthew 4:19. One moment he was casting nets into the sea. The next he was walking away from everything he knew to follow a carpenter from Nazareth. The opportunity was sudden, the call unmistakable, and the decision life-altering. Peter's story reminds us that divine opportunities often require immediate action. Hesitation can rob us of the very thing we've been praying for. One of the most challenging aspects of these shifts is the uncertainty they bring. When an opportunity appears, it rarely comes with guarantees. It often requires stepping out in faith, trusting that the same force that opened the door will guide you through it. Consider Esther, a young Jewish woman who became queen of Persia. When faced with the opportunity to save her people, she hesitated, knowing the risks involved. Yet her cousin Mordecai reminded her of the divine nature of her position. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Esther 4:14. Esther seized the opportunity, and her bold move changed the fate of an entire nation. Recognizing these shifts requires a heart tuned to the divine. It requires discernment to distinguish between distractions and true opportunities. The story of Nehemiah is a powerful example of this. Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the king, living a relatively secure life. Yet, when he learned of the broken walls of Jerusalem, he felt a sudden urgency to act. Despite his comfortable position, he saw this as a divine opportunity to rebuild what was broken. Nehemiah's willingness to step into this new role not only restored Jerusalem but also revealed the power of trusting in divine timing. Nehemiah 2. These opportunities often align with a growing sense of purpose. They call you towards something that resonates deeply with your spirit, even if it challenges your logic. When Jesus called the disciples, their decision to leave everything and follow him wasn't based on rational calculation. It was a response to a divine invitation that resonated with their hearts. The same is true for us today. Sudden shifts in opportunities are not meant to confuse or frighten us. They are meant to awaken us to the possibility of a life that aligns with our purpose. In these moments, it is vital to act with courage and faith. Opportunities have a way of slipping away when we hesitate or allow fear to dictate our choices. The parable of the talents in Matthew 25 illustrates this vividly. The servant who buried his talent missed the opportunity to multiply what he had been given, while the others who acted boldly were rewarded. Divine shifts in opportunities require not only recognition but also a willingness to step forward, even when the path ahead is unclear. A sudden shift in opportunities is a sacred signal, a divine whisper urging you to move. Whether it feels like a disruption or an open door, it is an invitation to trust, to act, and to embrace the journey ahead. 3. An unmistakable inner voice. There comes a moment in life when the noise of the world seems to fade, and in its place emerges a quiet yet firm voice deep within. It's not loud or demanding, yet it is impossible to ignore. This inner voice speaks directly to your soul, guiding you with clarity and purpose. It is not the product of fear or confusion, but of something far greater, a divine call to action. This unmistakable voice often arrives in pivotal moments, urging you to take a bold step, to leave the familiar, and to trust in a purpose that transcends human understanding. Throughout Scripture, we see this inner voice playing a crucial role in the lives of those chosen to fulfill divine purposes. One of the most striking examples is the story of Samuel. In 1 Samuel 3, young Samuel hears a voice calling his name in the stillness of the night. At first, he mistakes it for the voice of Eli, his mentor. 3 times the voice calls, and 3 times Samuel runs to Eli, only to discover it was not Eli speaking. Finally, Eli realizes the truth and instructs Samuel to respond, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." This moment marks the beginning of Samuel's prophetic journey, as he learns to recognize and obey the voice of God. This inner voice often comes when we least expect it. It may interrupt the mundane routines of life, as it did for Moses in Exodus 3. Moses was tending sheep in the wilderness when he encountered the burning bush. From the flames, a voice called his name, "Moses, Moses." Though hesitant and full of self-doubt, Moses listened, and the voice revealed a mission that would change the course of history. The inner voice doesn't always bring comfort. It often challenges us, confronts our fears, and calls us to something greater than ourselves. But how do we recognize this voice? It is not like the voices of doubt or fear that paralyze us. Instead, it is steady, unwavering, and deeply rooted in truth. Elijah's experience on Mount Horeb provides profound insight into this. In 1 Kings 19, Elijah seeks refuge in a cave, overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion. God tells him to stand on the mountain, where Elijah witnesses a series of dramatic events, a powerful wind, an earthquake, and a fire. Yet, God's voice is not in any of these. Instead, it comes in a gentle whisper, a still, small voice that speaks directly to Elijah's heart. This teaches us that the inner voice often comes in moments of quiet, when we are still enough to hear it. The inner voice doesn't always come with full instructions or a clear roadmap. It may simply urge you to take the first step. Abraham's story is a powerful example of this. When God called him to leave his homeland and go to an unknown land, Abraham did not know the destination. Yet he obeyed, trusting the voice that guided him. Genesis 12:1. This is the essence of faith, listening to the inner voice and acting on it, even when the path ahead is uncertain. This voice also aligns with truth and conviction. It doesn't contradict the principles of love, justice, and integrity. In the book of Acts, we see Paul's dramatic encounter on the road to Damascus. This voice not only redirects Paul's actions but transforms his entire identity, turning him from a persecutor of the faith into one of its greatest champions. When the inner voice speaks, it often redefines our purpose and sets us on a course we could never have imagined. The inner voice is not always easy to follow. It often requires great courage to act on its guidance, especially when it calls us to step into the unknown. Jonah's story is a vivid example of this struggle. When God's voice instructed him to go to Nineveh, Jonah resisted, fleeing in the opposite direction. Yet even in his disobedience, the voice pursued him, speaking to him through the storm and the great fish that swallowed him. Jonah 1. Jonah's journey reminds us that the inner voice is persistent, even when we try to ignore it. It will continue to call us until we align ourselves with its purpose. This voice also carries a sense of urgency, a feeling that action must be taken now. Consider the disciples who left everything to follow Jesus at the sound of his call. Come, follow me. Matthew 4:19. There was no time for hesitation or delay. The voice demanded an immediate response. This is often the nature of the inner voice. It speaks to the deepest parts of our being, urging us to act with boldness and faith. But the inner voice is not always about action. Sometimes it calls us to wait, to trust, and to prepare. In Psalm 46:10 we are reminded, "Be still and know that I am God." This stillness is not passive, it is an active posture of listening and surrender. When the inner voice speaks, it may not provide all the answers, but it offers enough light for the next step. It teaches us patience and trust, qualities essential for navigating the journey ahead. When you feel this inner voice, it often comes with a sense of peace, even amidst uncertainty. It is not chaotic or overwhelming, it is calming and reassuring, as though it knows the outcome even when you do not. Philippians 4:7 describes this as the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. This peace is a sign that the voice you are hearing is divine, guiding you toward your purpose with wisdom and love. This unmistakable inner voice is not random. It is purposeful. It is a divine signal, inviting you to step out in faith and embrace the path laid before you. It may challenge you, stretch you, and call you to let go of your fears, but it will never mislead you. When you hear this voice, do not ignore it. Listen closely, for it carries the wisdom and guidance you need to take the next bold step in your journey. 4. Discomfort in staying still. Discomfort in staying still is one of the most unmistakable signals that it's time to make a bold move. It's not a discomfort born of fear, laziness, or uncertainty. It's a divine restlessness that makes the familiar feel unbearable. It's as though every fiber of your being begins to resist the idea of staying in your current circumstances. This discomfort, while unsettling, is not meant to harm you, it is meant to propel you. It is the push that leads you to the edge of your comfort zone, urging you to leap into the unknown. In the Bible, we see this divine discomfort in the story of the Israelites during their exodus from Egypt. After years of slavery, God led them out of bondage with the promise of a new land. But between Egypt and the promised land was the wilderness, a place of uncertainty and discomfort. In Exodus 16:3, the Israelites complained, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve." Despite their freedom, they longed for the familiarity of Egypt, because it was comfortable, even though it was oppressive. This discomfort was intentional. God was shaking them out of their complacency, teaching them to depend on Him, and preparing them for the greater blessings ahead. The wilderness was not a punishment, it was a process. In the same way, when we feel discomfort in staying still, it is often because we are being prepared for something greater. The discomfort is not there to harm us, but to refine us, to strengthen our faith, and to awaken our courage. Discomfort often comes when we've outgrown our current circumstances. Like a bird that feels cramped in its nest, we begin to sense that it's time to spread our wings and fly. Consider the story of Gideon in Judges 6. Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress, hiding from the Midianites, when an angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon, full of doubt and fear, questioned his ability to lead. But the discomfort of his hiding in place, the knowledge that he was not living up to his potential, pushed him to accept the call to lead Israel. Gideon's story reminds us that discomfort often points to a higher purpose, a divine calling that requires us to step out of hiding and into the spotlight. This discomfort also challenges our attachments to comfort and security. In Genesis 19, we see the story of Lot and his family being rescued from Sodom. The angel warns them to flee and not look back, but Lot's wife, unable to let go of the familiar, turns back and is turned into a pillar of salt. Her story serves as a sobering reminder that clinging to what is comfortable can prevent us from moving forward into the life we are meant to live. Discomfort in staying still is a divine signal that it's time to let go of the past and embrace the future. Discomfort also manifests as a sense of spiritual unease. It's as if your soul knows you're not in the right place, and it begins to cry out for change. Consider the story of Jonah. When God called Jonah to go to Nineveh, Jonah ran in the opposite direction, boarding a ship to Tarshish. But his discomfort followed him. A great storm arose, and Jonah realized that his disobedience was the cause. He eventually surrendered to God's call, understanding that the discomfort he felt was not a punishment but a redirection Jonah won. This story illustrates that divine discomfort is relentless. It will pursue you until you align with your purpose. This kind of discomfort is also a catalyst for growth. In John 15:2, Jesus says, "Every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful." Pruning is an uncomfortable process, but it is necessary for growth. When we feel discomfort in staying still, it is often because we are being pruned. Our old habits, fears, and limitations are being cut away to make room for new growth. This process may be painful, but it is a sign that we are being prepared for something greater. Discomfort in staying still also reveals the limitations of our current environment. In Luke 5, we read about Peter, James, and John, who had been fishing all night without catching anything. When Jesus instructs them to cast their nets on the other side of the boat, they reluctantly obey and catch so many fish that their nets begin to break. This moment illustrates the futility of staying in the same place and doing the same things when the divine is calling us to move. Sometimes the discomfort we feel is a sign that it's time to try something new, to take a risk, and to trust the voice that is guiding us. Another profound aspect of this discomfort is its ability to challenge our faith. In Matthew 14, Peter steps out of the boat to walk on water toward Jesus. For a moment he walks on the waves, but when he sees the wind and begins to doubt, he starts to sink. The discomfort of the storm tested Peter's faith, but it also strengthened it. He learned that stepping out in faith, even in the midst of discomfort, is the key to experiencing the miraculous. Discomfort in staying still is a reminder that we were not created for stagnation. In Philippians 3:13-14, Paul writes, "Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus." This verse captures the essence of divine discomfort. It is a call to press on, to move forward, and to pursue the life we were created to live. When you feel this discomfort, it is not a sign of failure or inadequacy. It is a divine signal, a sacred invitation to step into the unknown and trust that you are being led to something far greater than you can imagine. Embrace the discomfort, for it is the catalyst for your transformation. 5. Recurring messages. When divine guidance seeks to reach you, it rarely speaks only once. Instead, it often comes in patterns, recurring messages, or themes that appear repeatedly in your life. These messages may come through conversations, books, dreams, scriptures, or even seemingly random events. They are gentle but persistent reminders, like ripples in water, drawing your attention to something you may have been overlooking. When these recurring messages appear, it is a signal that it's time to pay attention. They are divine nudges, urging you to make a bold move. In the Bible, one of the most compelling examples of recurring messages is found in the story of Joseph. While Joseph was imprisoned, he interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, both of which came to pass exactly as Joseph said, Genesis 40. Later, Pharaoh himself had 2 dreams, the dream of 7 fat cows being devoured by 7 thin cows, and the dream of 7 healthy heads of grain swallowed by 7 thin and scorched heads of grain. These recurring dreams were not random, they carried a divine message about an impending famine. Pharaoh's decision to heed these dreams and appoint Joseph to oversee the preparations not only saved Egypt, but positioned Joseph to fulfill his destiny. This story teaches us that recurring messages are not to be dismissed. They carry divine wisdom and purpose. Recurring messages are not always as dramatic as dreams or visions. Often they come in the form of repeated encounters with a theme or idea. You may find that a particular scripture, phrase, or thought keeps appearing, seemingly out of nowhere. In the story of Balaam in Numbers 22, Balaam is on his way to curse the Israelites when his donkey repeatedly stops and veers off the path. Each time, Balaam beats the donkey, unaware that an angel is blocking the way. Finally, the donkey speaks and Balaam's eyes are opened to see the angel. This humorous yet profound story illustrates how recurring messages often serve as warnings or redirections, helping us avoid paths that lead to harm. These recurring messages often align with a deeper longing or question in your heart. They resonate with you not because they are new, but because they confirm what you already know deep inside. In Luke 24, after Jesus' resurrection, he appears to 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus. As they walk, Jesus explains the scriptures to them, revealing how they point to him. Later, when he breaks bread with them, they recognize him, and one disciple exclaims, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road?" Luke 24:32. This burning within is the effect of recurring messages. They awaken a truth you've always known, but perhaps ignored or forgotten. Sometimes these messages come in unlikely ways. Consider the story of Naaman, a commander in the army of Aram, who sought healing for his leprosy, 2 Kings 5. When Naaman approached Elisha, the prophet did not meet him in person but sent a message instructing him to wash 7 times in the Jordan River. At first, Naaman dismissed this message as too simple and unworthy of his status. But his servants pleaded with him, repeating the prophet's instructions, until Naaman finally obeyed and was healed. This story highlights how recurring messages often challenge our pride or expectations, calling us to trust in simple yet profound acts of obedience. Recurring messages also serve as a form of confirmation. Gideon, before leading Israel into battle, sought reassurance from God. In Judges 6, he asked for a sign, laying out a fleece and asking that it be wet with dew while the ground around it remained dry. When God granted this sign, Gideon asked for the opposite the next night, and again God confirmed the message. This repetition was not due to God's impatience, but his willingness to reassure Gideon, strengthening his faith for the task ahead. Similarly, when we notice recurring messages in our lives, they often serve as divine confirmations, affirming that we are on the right path. These messages often align with divine timing. They may appear at critical junctures, when you are on the verge of a major decision or a significant change. In Acts 10, Peter receives a recurring vision of a sheet lowered from heaven, filled with animals considered unclean under Jewish law. The vision repeats 3 times, and each time, Peter hears the voice of God saying, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." Shortly after, Peter is invited to the house of Cornelius, a Gentile, and realizes the vision's meaning: the gospel is for all people, not just the Jews. This recurring message prepared Peter for a bold move that would change the course of the early church. Recognizing recurring messages requires spiritual sensitivity. They may come through people, circumstances, or even nature, but they all share a divine thread. Elijah, in 1 Kings 19, experienced this in a profound way. Fleeing for his life, he sought refuge in a cave, where he expected to hear God in dramatic events: a powerful wind, an earthquake, and a fire. Yet God's voice came in a gentle whisper, recurring not in volume but in persistence. This teaches us that divine messages often require us to quiet our minds and hearts to truly hear them. Recurring messages often call for action. They are not passive signs meant for observation, they are invitations to move forward. Jonah's story is a prime example of this. When God called Jonah to preach to Nineveh, Jonah fled in the opposite direction. But God's message did not change. It recurred through the storm, the sailors, and the great fish. Jonah could not escape the divine call, and ultimately he obeyed. Recurring messages are not just signs of what we should do, they are reminders that what we resist persists until we act. When you begin to notice patterns, themes, or repeated messages in your life, take them seriously. They are not coincidences, they are divine signals, urging you to pay attention and prepare for a bold move. These recurring messages are sacred reminders that you are being guided, reassured, and prepared for something far greater than you can imagine. Listen closely and trust the wisdom they carry. 6. New strength in unexpected places. One of the clearest signs that it's time to make a bold move is when you begin to feel new strength in unexpected places. It's not the kind of strength you've cultivated over time or something you've trained for. It feels as though it has been given to you. It may appear during moments of weakness, exhaustion, or doubt, yet it rises with undeniable clarity and power. This strength is not your own, it is divine, a sacred empowerment meant to propel you into action and carry you through what lies ahead. The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who discovered new strength just as they were called to step into the unknown. Consider the story of David as he faced Goliath. David was a young shepherd, seemingly unqualified to stand against a giant seasoned in battle. Yet, in 1 Samuel 17:45, David declares to Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." Where did this courage, this unshakable confidence, come from? David's strength was not rooted in physical might, but in his faith. In that pivotal moment, he drew upon a strength that was not his own, and it carried him to victory. This kind of strength often emerges when you feel least capable. In the story of Gideon, found in Judges 6, Gideon is called by God to deliver Israel from the oppression of the Midianites. At the time, Gideon considered himself the least in his family and his clan the weakest in Israel. Yet the angel of the Lord addresses him as a mighty warrior. Gideon's initial response is doubt, questioning how someone like him could possibly succeed. But God reassures him, saying, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" Judges 6:14. Gideon's strength did not come from his status or abilities, it came from God's presence and promise. This is the essence of divine strength. It often appears in our weakest moments, reminding us that we are never acting alone. New strength in unexpected places often aligns with a growing sense of purpose. It fuels you not just to survive but to overcome, to move forward with courage and determination. In Isaiah 40:29-31, we are reminded of this truth. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. This passage reveals the source of this new strength. It is not born of human effort, but of divine renewal. It comes when we place our hope and trust in something greater than ourselves. This divine strength often reveals itself in the face of fear. When Moses was called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he initially resisted, citing his inability to speak well as a reason to doubt his calling. But God's response was clear. Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. Exodus 4:11-12. Moses' new strength didn't come from suddenly becoming a great orator. It came from God's assurance that he would be with him every step of the way. In the same way, when we are called to make a bold move, we often find strength in places we never imagined, strength to speak, act, or endure in ways we thought impossible. This strength also manifests as resilience in the face of challenges. The Apostle Paul experienced this firsthand. In 2 Corinthians 12:9-10, Paul speaks of a thorn in his flesh that he asked God to remove. Instead of removing it, God responded, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul then declares, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. For when I am weak, then I am strong." This paradoxical truth illustrates that divine strength often emerges most powerfully when we acknowledge our limitations. It is in our moments of surrender that we discover the strength to endure and overcome. New strength in unexpected places also aligns with a sense of divine timing. You may find yourself suddenly capable of tasks or challenges that once seemed impossible. This was true for Esther, who, despite being a young woman in a foreign palace, rose to the challenge of saving her people. When the time came for her to approach the king uninvited, a decision that could have cost her life, she declared, "If I perish, I perish." Esther 4:16. Her courage was not her own, it was a divine empowerment for a moment that required boldness and faith. This kind of strength often arrives precisely when you need it most, as if placed there by the hand of God. This strength also inspires action, even in the face of uncertainty. Peter experienced this when he stepped out of the boat to walk on water toward Jesus. In Matthew 14:29, Jesus simply says, "Come, Peter." Despite the storm and the impossibility of the situation, steps out. For a moment he walks on water, supported by a strength that defies natural laws. Though he falters when he begins to doubt, the moment illustrates the power of divine strength. It enables us to do what we cannot do on our own, as long as we remain focused on the source of that strength. New strength in unexpected places often comes with a sense of peace. It is not frantic or chaotic, it is calm and steady, even in the midst of turmoil. Philippians 4:13 encapsulates this truth. I can do all things through Christ, who strengthens me. This verse is not about self-reliance, it is about divine reliance. It is a reminder that the strength we need to make a bold move does not come from within ourselves, but from a power far greater. When you feel this new strength rising within you, don't dismiss it as coincidence or fleeting confidence. It is a divine signal, a sacred empowerment for the journey ahead. It is there to remind you that you are not alone and that you have been equipped for the bold move you are about to make. Trust this strength and let it guide you into the unknown with courage and faith. 7. A leap of faith feels inevitable. There are moments in life when the weight of staying where you are becomes heavier than the fear of moving forward. In these moments, the idea of taking a leap of faith no longer feels optional, it feels inevitable. This is not a leap driven by reckless abandon, but by a deep, unshakable sense that the time has come to trust in the unseen, to step out without knowing where your foot will land. It is as though every fiber of your being aligns with the divine push, urging you to move forward despite uncertainty. When this feeling arises, it is a sacred signal, a call to action that requires courage, trust, and surrender. The Bible offers one of the most powerful examples of a leap of faith in the story of Abraham. In Genesis 12:1-4, God commands Abraham to leave his country, his people, and his father's household and go to a land that he would show him. God doesn't give Abraham a map or detailed instructions, only a promise: I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. Abraham obeys, stepping into the unknown with nothing but faith in God's word. His leap of faith was not based on certainty or evidence, it was rooted in trust. Abraham's story reminds us that when a leap of faith feels inevitable, it is often because a greater promise lies on the other side of that leap. This sense of inevitability often comes with a tension between fear and hope. Consider the Israelites standing at the edge of the Red Sea in Exodus 14. Behind them, Pharaoh's army was advancing, and before them stretched an impassable body of water. In that moment of desperation, Moses speaks words that have echoed through the ages: "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." Exodus 14:13. Then, at God's command, Moses raises his staff, and the sea parts, creating a path where none existed before. For the Israelites, stepping into that path required a leap of faith, one that carried them from captivity to freedom. This story illustrates that a leap of faith often feels inevitable when all other options have been exhausted, leaving you with no choice but to trust in a higher power. Sometimes this inevitability comes not from external circumstances, but from an internal conviction. The prophet Elijah experienced this on Mount Carmel in 1 Kings 18. In a dramatic confrontation with the prophets of Baal, Elijah calls upon God to send fire from heaven to demonstrate his power. Elijah's actions were bold, even risky, but they were driven by an unshakable confidence in God's faithfulness. When the fire fell, consuming the sacrifice and the altar, it affirmed that Elijah's leap of faith was not in vain. His story reminds us that when a leap of faith feels inevitable, it is often because a divine assurance has been planted in our hearts, urging us to act with boldness. This divine call to leap is not without its challenges. Fear often tries to hold us back, whispering doubts and uncertainties. Peter's walk on water is a profound example of this. In Matthew 14:28-29, Peter sees Jesus walking on the water and says, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus simply replies, "Come." Peter steps out of the boat and begins to walk on the water. For a moment he defies the laws of nature, supported by his faith. But when he notices the wind and waves, he begins to sink. Even then, Jesus reaches out and saves him, saying, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" This story teaches us that while a leap of faith may feel inevitable, it does not mean the journey will be free of challenges. The key is to keep your focus on the source of your faith, not the obstacles around you. A leap of faith often involves leaving behind what is familiar and comfortable. In the story of Ruth, we see a young widow who chooses to leave her homeland and follow her mother-in-law, Naomi, to a foreign land. When Naomi urges Ruth to stay behind, Ruth responds with unwavering resolve: "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God." Ruth 1:16. Ruth's leap of faith led her to a new life, a new purpose, and ultimately a place in the lineage of Christ. Her story reminds us that when a leap of faith feels inevitable, it often requires us to let go of the past and embrace an uncertain future. This sense of inevitability is not limited to dramatic moments, it can also manifest in the quiet decisions of everyday life. In Luke 5, Jesus calls his first disciples, saying, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Despite having fished all night without success, Peter obeys, saying, "Because you say so, I will let down the nets." The result is a miraculous catch of fish, so overwhelming that their nets begin to break. This leap of faith, though seemingly small, marked the beginning of the disciples' journey with Jesus. It teaches us that even small leaps of faith can lead to extraordinary outcomes when guided by divine prompting. Divine leaps of faith also come with a sense of peace, even in the midst of uncertainty. In Philippians 4:6-7, Paul writes, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." This peace is not the absence of fear, but the presence of trust. It is the assurance that, even though you cannot see the whole picture, you are being guided by a hand that never fails. A leap of faith often feels inevitable because it aligns with a deep sense of purpose. Esther's story exemplifies this beautifully. When faced with the threat of her people's destruction, Esther is urged by her cousin Mordecai to act. He tells her, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Esther 4:14. Though hesitant at first, Esther embraces her role and takes the bold step of approaching the king uninvited, an action that could have cost her life. Her leap of faith not only saved her people, but fulfilled her divine purpose. When a leap of faith feels inevitable, it is not a sign of recklessness but of readiness. It is the culmination of divine preparation, a moment when you realize that staying where you are is no longer an option. This is the sacred invitation to trust, to act, and to step into the life you were created to live. The leap may be daunting, but it is also the doorway to transformation. Trust the feeling and take the step. When divine signals align, they call for more than observation, they demand action. Each sign we've explored is a sacred whisper, urging you to rise above fear and step into the life you were created to live. They are not mere coincidences, they are divine invitations. They come to awaken your spirit, ignite your courage, and guide you toward your destiny. Life's most profound changes are rarely wrapped in comfort. They come disguised as restlessness, opportunities, whispers, discomfort, repeated signs, unexpected strength, and the undeniable pull to leap forward. These signals are not meant to overwhelm you, but to prepare you, to remind you that you are not navigating this journey alone. They are assurances that something greater is waiting for you on the other side of fear. Now, the question is not whether these signals are present in your life, but whether you will respond to them. Will you continue to linger in the familiar, or will you trust the divine call to move forward? The path ahead may not be fully visible, but that's where faith comes in. Faith bridges the gap between where you are and where you're meant to be. It assures you that the same power that placed these signals before you will guide you through them. The time to act is now. These signs are not here by accident. They are here because you are ready to grow, ready to overcome, and ready to step boldly into the purpose for which you were made. Trust the signals, trust the process, and most importantly, trust the one who has called you forward. Your bold move is not just a step, it is the beginning of a journey that will transform your life and the lives of those around you. So as you stand on the edge of this moment, let courage rise. Let faith lead. The leap may feel daunting, but remember this: you were never meant to stay where you are. You were meant to move forward, to embrace the extraordinary, and to fulfill the purpose that only you can fulfill. The signs are clear. The time is now. It's your move.